So, welcome everyone to this week's episode of our podcast with Nicki and myself, Dave Smith. Today we have an exciting guest and discussion lined up for you guys. We have the amazing Stacey Epstein, the Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer at ServiceMax. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Now, ServiceMax focuses on field service management solutions. Specifically, it offers asset-centric field service management software, including the real-time communication solution Zinc, which I've covered for a while. Now, Nicki, I'll let you introduce yourself as well. And I know one of the reasons that we wanted to speak with Stacey was to get her take on the current reality we're all now facing with remote working, being sheltered in place, many of us, and how that impacts specifically her laser sharp focus on the customer experience at ServiceMax, especially in the area of field service, among others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave, for the intro, and Stacey, thanks again for joining us. Just real quick background on myself. My name's Nicki Catchpole. I'm a senior analyst at TBR. We're a small research firm based out of New Hampshire. I specifically cover cloud solutions, but that's more of just a title. I see cloud as being part of the overall realm of digital transformation at large, and just connects with so many pieces that fit under that umbrella. In terms of what I'd be interested in, we can weave this throughout the conversation as you see fit, was in reading about your background, I noticed a really strong lens over women working from home, people who are, whether they're mothers or parents or not, but if you could lend your insight into perhaps how this pandemic is affecting people in the short and the long term, with a lens to how this could potentially affect, whether positively or negatively, women in the workplace at large. I'd be particularly interested in hearing your take on that.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. We can start there. I can give a little bit of an overview about ServiceMax, but maybe we can talk about the work from home situation. Having been a 30-year veteran in the technology and software space myself, and also I happen to be a woman. I've been observing, writing about this, and focusing some of my energy on just helping promote the notion of women in the workplace. It's interesting because one of my platforms, especially after I became a mom, I have an 11-year-old daughter, so it's been a little over a decade now that I've been a mom. And one of my big observations about women in the workplace is that I do think as women, we get sent messages very early on that at some point we're going to have to make a choice. I always like to say, if I'm giving a speech in a crowd, I say, how many of you have kids? And a certain number of people raise their hands. And then when you say, how many people of you were asked if you're going back to work after you have the child, you notice that literally 100% of the time, it's only women that raise their hand. Men never get asked if they're going back to work after having their kid. It's slightly starting to change, but generally it's still true. And I think it's just a testament to the messages that we're told, which is you eventually are going to have to make a choice. Either you have a big job or you're a good mom or a good parent. And I've been really focused on trying to help make change in our messages that we send, and even in our own viewpoints, that you can do both. You can have a big job and also be a present, great parent. Now, I think this time that we're in with battling COVID-19, it certainly poses challenges left and right across the spectrum. But I think it is shining a huge light on the challenge of doing both. It's one thing to have a great childcare solution and leave for work and put in a good solid day at your big job and then come home and be a present parent, which is how I'd like to think that I've been able to manage both, is that, I'm very present in my job for certain hours of the day, and then I'm very present at home for certain hours of the day. We're all being very much challenged with that. The challenge of, right now I've got a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old in the next room, and they need to stay on task with their schoolwork, and that requires my time, and it requires my supervision. And I'm lucky to have a partner in my husband who takes on a lot of the workload in that area. But that balance has, I think, come into full view, and a spotlight is really being shown on it. And I think it's being shown on it for everyone. And the men and the women who haven't really grasped the challenge of doing both are living it hour by hour. And I don't know, right now it just feels like pure challenge, and we're trying to figure out schooling and things like that. I do think that this new realization for everybody of what's really involved hopefully will help us come up with some better solutions for managing the balance, and also just giving people the space in this world to do both, to continue to have big roles in their jobs and also to play big roles in the raising of their family.
I think a lot of people will identify with that stance and what you just spoke to. And like, in terms of taking the lessons that we're continually learning, as you say, hour to hour, and applying it to your job, do you see kind of emergence of the two, that what we learn by being kind of forced into this, I struggle, the English major in me struggles to come up with new words to describe exactly what we're going through, but it's kind of unprecedented time. Do you think that some of those lessons will actually inform how companies like ServiceMax, how their portfolios evolve and how they target different customer groups, just because we've learning in real time, essentially, some of the customer challenges that might not have been put to light, in our past world, just 2 months ago?
Yeah. Well, I'm an English major too, so my struggle will be with you. All I can say is I hope. I will say certainly for our own company, and we, although we do have employees across the globe, we do also have offices across the globe. And for those that go into an office, we do have a very much work in the office culture, and we've had to make a dramatic shift. And there have been so many conversations at the executive level at our company about how to manage and evolve our culture in this time. And, you can imagine it ranges from, we got to put the pedal to the metal. And even though other companies are struggling, we can't let up. We got to push. And then the tension between that and the conversations around, hey, one of our key employees who's working on the most important initiative in the company has 2 little kids, and we can't break her. We have to give her the time and the space to manage her home life, and a real understanding amongst our executive team that there is tension and conflict between high performing employees and giving employees the space to manage everything that's happening in their world. And the interesting part of that is that's always been true, right? Like, don't we always need to think about the tension between driving performance and also balance in people's lives and letting them pursue other interests, whether it's their kids or a hobby or an animal, a pet or a boat or whatever it is. Like, that has always existed. And I think great leaders have understood that tension and found a way to drive a culture that allows for both. I mean, certainly we see it in what people here call, the hipster policies of bring your dog to work, and, hey, we have ping pong tables and a beer keg, and they put that on their talent page. I mean, I think those are efforts into trying to do that. But I think the global understanding that is coming to leaders, and when you hear like high performance, just like, leaders that push and push and push, and you hear them talking about, hey, look, it's okay to not be perfect. If you need to take an hour or 2 and dedicate it to making sure your kids are safe and are doing what they need to do, it's okay. The optimist in me hopes that that's going to bring about a more permanent change and a more permanent understanding in that tension between real work and real life.
Absolutely. It's something that Nikki and I actually have been talking about ourselves. That's the whole human factor, right? We're now seeing our, what once were separate worlds, our work world and our real life world, now together. And the fact is, they weren't ever separate, really. We're the
Yeah.
same people in both realms. And so, like, having some understanding from management, as you're saying, to really understand that, hey, I'm the same person dropping my kids off, in the morning, the same person that's in that 9 a.m. meeting as well, too. And I have other issues. So that's a
Yeah.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the perfect example, I'm sure you guys will remember the video clip that went around of the guy on the BBC news show that was being interviewed at his house, and
Yeah.
his kid came walking in, and his nanny then came in and like chased the kid out. And I mean, that thing circulated like, oh my gosh, isn't that so funny? Wouldn't that be so embarrassing? And now here we are a couple of years later, and like that, I mean, my kids come in all the time. And sometimes I'm on a really important call, and if one of them walked in now, I'd probably say, honey, I'm on a podcast. Can you come back later? But neither of you would flinch, right? And I mean, I'm on board calls with our board, and someone's kid comes in or someone's dog barks, and nobody flinches. And I think it's just a great symbol of a new understanding that people have, that like we all have other lives. We all have, dogs or kids or whatever it is that might interrupt, and it's okay. And sometimes, you put a little note on your door that says, I'm recording a podcast, please come back in an hour. But there isn't this like, I don't have, oh my gosh, my kid came in, this is so terrible, I'm so embarrassed. It's just a new level of understanding that the world has, and I hope it means real change for us as real people that have real lives outside of work.
Totally. I think you sort of said two terms which I jotted down. It's the new realization and the new understanding. I know we've heard the new normal, but I think that's really what it is. We're all realizing, something new that's already existed. So that's a great point.
Yeah, Dave, I call it the new abnormal. I don't know.
Love it.
It's like that doesn't exist anymore. Well, what is normal?
Exactly. Now, to pivot a little bit and some of the work stuff. Now, I've read your recent blog, Stacey, and it's we've seen where some of your customers are doing some interesting things in terms of battling COVID-19 on the front lines. Can you talk to us about some of that and some of the things that those customers are doing?
Yeah, definitely. Very exciting. So just a quick background. I know you mentioned it and you know us well, but ServiceMax, we make field service software. So we help automate and optimize the process of all those field service technicians who today aren't going so much into homes and fixing your appliances, but they're definitely going into hospitals and fixing ventilators and setting up ventilators and fixing big hospital machines, and working on oil rigs and utility poles. And those are absolutely the essential workers who are out there still getting a lot of important jobs done. We make software that helps them with their schedules, with their work order management, with tracking parts and contracts, etc. I come to ServiceMax by way of Zinc, which David knows well, the real-time communication solution that was acquired by ServiceMax about a year ago. But now that you understand what our company does, you can imagine that many of our customers are very core to the fight against COVID-19. In fact, it's been very inspiring for me to watch press conferences and see many of our customers, Medtronic, Philips, Thermo Fisher, Abbott, being mentioned. And either they're like biotech companies, like I mentioned, Thermo Fisher, PerkinElmer, Abbott, Roche, that are setting up testing equipment and new tests and piloting things in labs, working on vaccines and treatments. Or it's med device companies like Medtronic, GE Healthcare, Philips, 3D Systems, who are stepping up production of hospital equipment and things like ventilators to help fight the disease. There's companies that are adapting to new safety requirements and labor constraints to keep supply chains up and running, like processing and packaging companies like Compaq and Merrill and Domino, or some of our distribution customers. Like, I mean, how crucial is FedEx right now? Hyster Yale, Lift One. And then even new entrants into the space. So companies like Dyson or even McLaren F1 Racing have now shifted their production from working on race cars to working on things like ventilators. So I think it's really amazing. We've always had a tagline that we help our customers keep the world running at ServiceMax, and man, it sure is true now. It feels like life and death that these companies can be so core. And I think one of the things that has been most impressive to me is looking at some of these companies that are literally opening up their patents and just saying, again, back to that tension between high performance and also an understanding that there are real lives out there, bypassing profitability and saying, you know what, right now the most important thing is just that we save lives, and whether or not we keep our patents to ourselves is irrelevant. And so those are also signs that get me optimistic that we can come out of this with a new understanding and a new normal.
So that's great. And funny, it leads us into, something that we've been talking about, which is we're seeing this new level of altruism, right? From the tech community, it's starting to take center stage. What are some of the things, that you're seeing or that ServiceMax is doing right now in the area of giving back to, to your customers, from best practice recommendations and employees at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think right out of the gate, that altruism just, there's certainly nothing more powerful than having a common foe. And the fact that the whole world is battling against this COVID-19, in many ways it unites us. And when you're united and you're all fighting on one team, you want to help each other and leverage your own strengths to help others. I mean, we were immediately brainstorming what could we do, and we're certainly doing things on a customer by customer basis. Some of those customers that I mentioned who are deep in the fight, we're working very closely with them and helping them on their unique needs. But as a whole, one of the things that we did is we offered our solution Zinc, which I mentioned earlier. We're offering it for free now. We initially said 3 months. Hope maybe that was optimistic that we'd be out of this in 3 months, and we'll certainly look to extend it. But it's interesting. I mean, real time. You and I have had this conversation before. That communication is mission critical, and I think that's more true now than ever. You look at some of our manufacturing customers are running at 4 times capacity. Yeah. They're churning out materials 4 times as much as they did before. And that means they have to bring on new staff to help meet the need. When you bring on new staff, you're inherently bringing on lesser trained workforce. And these people are in the field doing important things like installing new ventilators and new equipment. You have to give them a way to reach experts and get their questions answered. So that collaboration, that real-time communication, you need a platform for that. And you need a way to get them to a hotline and to that tribal knowledge in the organization that they just need to know. Also, policies and procedures are changing very quickly. What was true yesterday could change tomorrow. There's new protocol and procedures and checklists, and making sure that you can communicate and get those answers to and from your field is very important. So I think that's really one of the main things we're doing in mass across both customers and prospects. Zinc is now free for at least 3 months to anybody who needs to use a real-time communication system built for a mobile workforce. That's I think the main thing we're doing.
Yeah, that is great. It's funny. I've joked, and we've been joking that this whole thing with the pandemic and real-time communication now being sort of one of the primary tools, right? Being used to communicate, to bring teams together. Everyone that's been on the fence about digital transformation, about real-time collaboration tools, they're not being digitally transformed, right? There's no choice. You're not in the throes of it, right?
Yep, exactly.
And Dave, that kind of gets me back to some of the topics that I cover regarding digital transformation as a whole, that before it was the choice, and that people almost had this kind of innate luxury to sit back and decide when they wanted to automate certain aspects of their operations, or when they wanted to adopt, for instance, moving to the cloud, and And right now that's not the case. We're seeing a lot of people, just by virtue of our new reality, being forced into an operating mode that some were not ready or culturally equipped to deal with. So I'm kind of interested, Stacey, in hearing your take on, are you seeing any difference between the people who already made some strides to adopt digital transformation in any sort of scale versus those who might have been taking a longer or weighing their other options, and how they're faring in today's environment?
Yes, 100%. And I've said this before in blogs. Those that got ahead of the game on digital transformation are just better enabled to deal with the scenario. And I'll give a very specific example that I think is relative in our industry. Um, David said it earlier, we do asset-centric field service management. So we focus on companies that have large, high-value equipment or assets that need to be serviced. And one of the terms we use is asset 360, having a 360-degree view of, where are they installed? What is the service history? When might they break down? And having that live and up and running has become crucial. I mean, you look at many of our healthcare systems and hospitals and even municipalities that are busy trying to even just count the number of ventilators that we have. And I'm using a very specific example, but I think it tells the point. If we just stick with ventilators for a minute, how many do we have? And honestly, how many we have isn't even relevant. What's relevant is how many of them are up and running and in working condition. And that goes to the service problem. And if you take that even deeper into a deeper digital transformation and go to like IoT, where you have connected devices, where you could do things like predictive and preventative maintenance, and all these things that help us understand where the equipment is, understand when it's going to break, understand how to get it fixed, get a work order there, get a technician there, keep it up and running so it literally never goes down. It is an operation that can save lives. And I think certainly we're seeing that our municipalities do not have this level of sophistication. I think no one could have really predicted exactly what we would be in right now, although certainly some experts talked about it years ago. But those that have done that, those that have taken the steps to really get a good picture of their assets, are the ones that are best able to respond to the scenario that we're in. I mean, we're actually working on some very quick solutions that we could roll out that could help, that are lightweight, that aren't a big technology implementation, but at least could help do some tracking and management of assets for some of these organizations that just frankly had never prioritized it, and because of it they just have no way to respond quickly. And the ones that can respond quickly are the ones that already are well on their way to achieving that digital transformation.
Like, I can envision over time, or over this short period of time, but it seems like it's been going on forever, that the array, the breadth and the depth of knowledge that we're gaining every day and that we're recording, there has to be some good that comes out of it. And I think you alluded to this before, whereby we will be better prepared undeniably than we were a year ago or a couple of months ago. And people always reference the Hurricane Sandy handbook, and that, we're prepared now. That was a huge disaster, and it was, not trying to undermine that, but that going forward there has to be some kind of aggregation of all these learnings that will, for the future, equip people to better be able to respond, so that, God forbid, if something of this scale happens again, it won't be as disastrous as what we're living in the midst of. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I live here in Northern California, and in the past couple of years, as you I'm sure know, we've been hit quite hard by fires. And some of it may be caused by our utility company, just the changing weather patterns, but they've been deadly. And I think, now we have rolling blackouts, and even neighborhoods have all sorts of plans that were devised on Nextdoor on how do we, my family got evacuated in the fall, and at a time when the power was shut off. So people's Wi-Fi routers weren't up. And the only people that got the notices of the evacuation order were people that had cell phone service. And just a nightmare situation to be in. And you look back and you think, God, how could we be so underprepared? Like, how did we not know this was coming? And plenty of experts saying that it was. And I can guarantee you now we all have our go bags ready, and there all sorts of plans have been put in place for the next fire season, which will come upon us this fall. And I think the same will be true with digital transformation. I think a lot of these organizations will say, wow, we just weren't ready, and we had to spend way too much time trying to catch up, or even just wait it out and not participate because we weren't ready. I do think we'll see a real push toward digital transformation as companies come out of this crisis situation and have the time to think about how do we get prepared. Everyone's telling us that this isn't going to be the last pandemic, and certainly no one wants to be in this position again. So I do think from a digital transformation perspective, it will really change the aggressiveness that organizations go after it. I will also, I read a really, really interesting, blog, for lack of a better word, over the weekend by Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz. And I think it's called It's Time to Build. So you can look for him on Twitter or LinkedIn, or go to Andreessen Horowitz and find it. But I just was really inspired by it. It talks a lot about how we need to shift our focus, how both the right and left need to make a few changes in fighting against each other, and permit the world to build what we need to build to have us prepared, not only for this, but for anything we might face in the future. So I recommend you guys read it if you haven't already. And I also highly recommend it to readers. It's a great read on how we should shift our focus. And I think it's going to give real meaning to the words mission critical and mission driven. And companies that are mission driven are going to be not only mission driven to make social change, but I also think to make these changes in the world that just get us prepared for anything we might face.
Those are really poignant thoughts, Stacey. We are in this sort of new realization and this new understanding. And with that, there will be a lot of learnings from this, that we will begin to apply in the future as well. Thanks again, Stacey, for joining us. Any final thoughts?
No, it's been great talking to you guys. Great questions. You definitely asked me all the things I'm really passionate about. So hopefully we can all keep the dialogue going with each other and in our worlds. And just thanks for creating a place where we can talk about these important topics.
Thank you, Stacey. And don't be surprised if you hear from us in a few months and kind of wanting an update and to see where your head is at. We kind of creating our own little roadmap as I speak right now, but we'd love to get your thoughts after hopefully the dust or proverbial dust has settled a little bit more.
Yep.
Exactly.
Would love to.
Yeah, and Stacey, we do need some advice though. We have still not come up with a name for this podcast, and we know you're a marketing expert, so we'll have to take it offline. But we'll definitely need some some advice and some brainstorming from you.
I may have
that was our ulterior motive.
a few other ones, and I'll come back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacey.
All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a great week, guys.
Bye.
Bye.